When I was young, we used to make fun of our people. Oh, look how mediocre they are. Look, everything they do is unprofessional. But, why not improve them? Why not help them to be world class? Because they're our people, they deserve the best. My name is Nicholas Al-Jeloo. I was born in Australia to a family that migrated from Iraq. I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. My older brother and sister are born in Kuwait, and obviously my parents were born in Iraq. The rest of the family were all Iraqi citizens, actually. I was the only one, because I was born in Australia, that never got registered and never got Iraqi citizenship until much later. My PhD was in Syriac Studies. I wrote my thesis about Assyrian history in Iran, in Urmia, using the inscriptions that they have there. So there are a lot of inscriptions written in modern Aramaic, so the modern Assyrian language, written in classical Syriac. More than 2,000 inscriptions I managed to find in different cemeteries and churches in all the villages over there. And so I use them as my main source material to write my thesis.
دينجا.
أخذ عنك ولا؟
لا كذي بصراحة. خدينجا إثو قاعد عنك.
أي بدو خازخ مارا دورة صبنا. الدورة اللي قاعد صبنا. ديرة اللي قاعد صبنا. منطقة صبنا لا. الدورة اللي قاعد دورة قبروري لا.
إيه والله دورة قبروري.
I like this picture. Look how smiley she is. Oh. For me, identity is multi-layered, and we all carry different identities within ourselves. So, for example, I am Australian born. I also now have Iraqi citizenship. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a cousin, I'm an uncle. I'm many things, I'm a scholar. But at the same time, if you ask me about ethnicity, I would say historically, geographically, I'm Assyrian. Linguistically, I'm Aramean. I speak Aramaic. Religiously, I'm a Syriac Christian. My church is part of Syriac Christianity. It uses classical Syriac as a liturgical language. In terms of rite, I'm Chaldean because we are the Eastern Syriacs. So the Eastern Assyrians are Chaldeans. So I'm all of these, and I'm Iraqi, I'm Australian, I'm part of this land, and I'm part of this heritage, and all of these names and all of these identities are what make me. That's my grandfather. This is my grandfather's first cousin, Patros. This is the man who gave me the picture. This man here explained the picture to me. He was born the same year as my grandfather. They were the same age, from the same village.
Okay.
And I met him, I was lucky to meet him before he passed away in 2003. And I stayed with him and his family in 2003, 2004. And I asked him, because he was born before the genocide.
Wow.
So he knew about our village, he'd seen our village. He told us about how our family lived before they had to leave Turkey during the genocide. So he told me about the school, how my grandfather got his name. He told me about how our family escaped from the home, like everything.
Wow.
Yeah. And this man who's standing in front of him later became a bishop in our church.
Okay.
So he explained to me, this was the principal of the school. He later became a priest. His name was Joseph Qalleta. He was a very learned man. And these were all mostly refugee children from Turkey and from Iran. Growing up in Australia, we always had this disconnect, but there was always this longing and always this nostalgia for Iraq in our household. So obviously the food, the culture, the music, it was all Iraqi. Even my parents had taped, the old days of VHS, they taped Iraqi TV shows and they would sit and watch them in Australia many years after the fact, but they would sit and watch theatre plays, TV shows, films from Iraq, songs, because they were so nostalgic for their homeland. And I grew up with this, even though I never learned Arabic as a child. For me, it was always this exotic language that my parents would speak when they didn't want me to understand. They would always tell me, son, we're Assyrians from Iraq. We're from, our homeland is Iraq. Now, when I was 7 years old, the first Gulf War started. Obviously, before that, until I was, let's say, five. When I was 5, the Iran-Iraq war ended, right? And I can't remember talking about Iraq before I was 5. I mean, that's when I started primary school. But, for me, what really affected me was when I was in first grade and I had some unsensitive children mocking me, making fun of me, saying, ha ha ha, your people are dying, your people are getting killed by the Americans, you're Iraqi, And so that really hurt me. And instead of being anti-Iraqi or reacting against, like pushing the whole concept of being from Iraq away, it actually made me want to know more about Iraq. And it made me more intensively interested in my roots. So, as a child, I would always ask my father, because, I grew up in a multicultural school, in a multicultural area of Sydney. And, people would always go back to Italy for the holidays. They'd go back to their family's village. They'd see their relatives, if it was Italy or Spain or Greece or the Philippines or whatever. And I would say, look, why can't we go back home? Like, we have a country, why can't we go visit? And the answer would always be, look, there's a war, look, it's not ours anymore. Saddam Hussein is ruling, he's a dictator, he might do something to us. So there was always this fear of coming back. And I broke that fear when I was 18. When I was 18, I found an ad on an Assyrian forum online. There was an author from Switzerland named Christoph Baumer who wrote a book about the Church of the East and the history of Assyrian Christianity. And he needed a photographer because he couldn't come here to northern Iraq. I think he had some health issues. So he said, look, I need someone to come. Or first it was he wanted someone to guide him, right? And because I'd always been interested and I'd always been researching the history and the geography of this area, I thought I knew enough to guide this person, right? I was 18 and I was a bit overconfident. So then he said, look, I have some health issues, I can't come. Can you go instead by yourself and take photos? So I took photos for his book. I went to Vienna, he trained me how to take photos, and I came here to Iraq and I went to Syria as well. So that trip I spent about 8 or 9 months total in the Middle East, to all these areas related to Assyrian history, Assyrian culture, the traditional homelands of the Assyrian, Syriac, Chaldean people, right? So Urmia, Hakkari, northern Iraq, Tur Abdin, the Jazeera in Syria, so Hasaka, Khabur, Qamishli, all these areas, Diyarbakir, Ufa. I spent about 8 months traveling all over. So I managed to take photos for him from Iraq and Syria, which he used in his book, and actually one of the pictures is on the cover of his book. I always considered everything we did in the West, everything we did in the diaspora to be fake, to be an imitation of everything that was original and authentic here. And I considered as much as we tried to be authentic in the diaspora, it wasn't enough, right? And I noticed that our people focusing more on religious pilgrimages. They want to go to Lourdes, they want to go to Fatima, they want to go to Jerusalem, they want to go to Rome, especially the Holy Land, Jerusalem. And I thought, look, we also have holy places. We also have places that are relevant to us culturally, historically. We have our ancestral, sites. We have our own saints. We have our own holy places. Why don't we focus on, visiting them, Why don't we make pilgrimage to them? Why are we making pilgrimage to all these places that are culturally and historically relevant to other people instead of focusing on our own? And that was one of the main reasons, and because I'd had a sheltered life in Australia, very far away, I really wanted to break free from that. So my parents obviously didn't agree with me going, but when I told them, so I basically did everything without them knowing. So I got this job taking photos for the author. I got a loan away. The loan was later. I worked and I saved up some money, and then I bought my plane ticket, and then I got a loan, and that's when I broke it to my dad because my dad had to be my guarantor. So I said, you know what, Dad, actually, I bought my ticket. I'm going to Iraq. Well, I was going to Iran first. So the plan was I bought a ticket with Austrian Airlines to go first via Vienna to Tehran. I started my trip in Tehran. Iran was the first country I ever visited as an 18-year-old who'd never been out of Australia before. And then I was planning to return to Australia from Beirut or Damascus. I wasn't sure, but my dad said to me, why don't you just wait until you finish your studies and at least you'll have a degree, people will respect you more, you'll know more about the place. And I said, no, I want to go now. Yeah, and like the friendships that I made back then, I still have today. And I thank God. So I went in 2002, and it was a year before Saddam fell. And obviously, I didn't go to the areas under Saddam's rule. That was the only promise I made to my parents. They said to me, please don't go where Saddam is ruling, go to the north. I said, yes. The things that I saw then, I'll never see again. Sleeping on the roof, sleeping on a bed woven from sticks with, sleeping outside, sitting around a big plate of food with a spoon, eating from one plate with everybody else. All these things. Sitting on the floor and eating. Back in the days when they didn't have couches, everybody sat on the floor. They'd put a mat, the khasira, straw mat, and then on top of that they'd put a carpet, and then they'd put along the walls, they'd put the very thin doshakyatha, what do you call them? The mattresses, and then, pillows to lean back on, and that was the living room. That was how people lived. And I got to see that. I got to see people living in mud houses, Assyrian people still living in villages and mud houses. And that doesn't exist anymore. I especially visited Syria a lot because I ended up realizing I had a lot of family in Syria. So my grandfather's cousins, so my father's father, his family split up because of the 1933 massacre by the Iraqi government of Assyrians at Semel. So, because of that, about 12,000 Assyrians sought refuge in Syria, which was under French mandate at the time, and they were settled along the banks of the Khabur River where they built new villages. And so a lot of them were my grandfather's relatives. They went and they lived in a village called Tel Goran. So Tel Goran was one of the 36 Assyrian villages on the Khabur. And so I really, when I went the first time in 2002, I connected with them. I managed to complete our family tree because we didn't have all of the details of our family tree until we went actually, and I went and got the information from them. I developed a really strong relationship with them, and they were all over Syria, like not just in Hasake, not just in the village. So I ended up going to Syria maybe 5 or 6 times, also going to Lebanon maybe 5 or 6 times between 2002 and 2010. Which was the year before the civil war started in Syria. I went to Iran another 2 times to do my fieldwork for my PhD, travels in Jordan, in other places, but for Iraq, I only visited one more time. So I visited in 2009, end of 2009, beginning of 2010. First time I came to Iraq was in 2002, before the regime change in Baghdad, so before the American occupation and the change of the regime in Baghdad. And then when I came again in 2009, it was very different. It didn't feel like the same place. I sort of decided to limit my visits, I guess, because Iraq became very dangerous afterwards. You know, there was a civil war in a large part of the country, and to be honest, I had come to author a report about the human rights situation here and the stories that we'd been hearing about what was happening in places like Mosul, Baghdad, all the terrorist activity. It was really gut-wrenching stuff. You know, when you sit with the families of people whose children had been killed, when you speak with people that had to flee their homes because they'd received death threats, it became very painful, and I started to absorb their trauma. Capable of making a difference for the good, you know? I feel like, you know, it's very important to be here if you can. If you can make a difference, if you can change something for the better, why not? After living in Istanbul for 2 years, and I adored Istanbul, I really loved Istanbul. It's an amazing city, but look, I felt, yes, it's the Middle East, it's close to my culture, it's close to my heritage, but not really. For some reason, I ended up migrating to Mardin. Now, what helped me was that at our university, teaching shifted to online teaching. So we could teach online. We weren't required to be in class in person to teach. So I was able to teach online for maybe 2 years or 2.5 years, and that really helped. So I ended up being in Mardin, and I thought, let me stay here until the coronavirus ends, and I ended up staying for 3 years. So Mardin really was an amazing experience. Being close to Hakkari, being close to Tur Abdin, being close to our remaining community that still lives there, being able to go and visit all the different heritage sites, the ancient churches, the monasteries, the ruins. I really felt connected and in tune with my identity and who I was. And so in 2022, I finally managed to build up the courage to visit Iraq again after so many years. I mean, I'd been to Iraq in 2019, but for 3 days. I came for a conference that my late friend Ashur Sargon Askharia had organized in Duhok. He was the president of the Assyrian Aid Society in Iraq, and he had organized a conference about endangered languages. It was the year of I think the UN Year of Endangered Languages, and we organized something about the Assyrian Aramaic language, and I came for that and went back. I didn't stay and I didn't travel. So that year, you know, while I was teaching online again, I spent a lot of time going back and forth, you know, between Mardin, Tur Abdin, Hakkari, North Iraq, back and forth, and I really enjoyed it. To be honest, I felt so much at home, and I felt like there was a need for me to be here. There was something pulling me, right? Something attracting me to come here and maybe even settle. So in 2023, when I came for Assyrian New Year again, for Akitu, I ended up staying. I didn't go back to Turkey. Right now we're sitting in the Syriac Heritage Museum in Ankara, And the Syriac Heritage Museum is managed by the General Directorate for Syriac Culture and Arts, which is part of the Cultural Ministry, the Ministry of Culture and Youth of the Iraqi Kurdistan region. And it is an institution that's been around for maybe 20 years now, but maybe a bit less. But you know, it is an important institution, and it's somewhere that you know, I've been working closely with through the General Directorate. So one of my reasons that I decided to come and stay in Iraq was my contact with the General Director for Syriac Culture and Arts. So when I came in 2022, I managed to make contact with Rabbi Keldo Ramzi, who was, or still is, the General Director for Syriac Culture and Arts. And, you know, we basically, he encouraged me to come by saying, look, I'll pay you something if you will be the English language editor of our magazine, which he newly started up again. It had been dead for about 10 or 12 years. So he resurrected Banipal magazine in 4 languages. So in Syriac, Arabic, Kurdish, and English. And he wanted me to be the editor of the English section, as well as to translate news items for the General Directorate and to edit all of their English materials. So that's what I did. And to be honest, that really gave me the impetus to be able to stay. Because it was, you know, even though I was teaching at a university in Turkey, luckily my contract had just finished with the university, and I was looking for something more closely connected with my culture and with my heritage, with my people. So something that would not just help them, but also be able to showcase our people and our heritage to non-Assyrians, to be able to understand who we are in their native language. So English, which is now a world language actually. You know, Surat and English are both my native languages. So it gives me the advantage of being able to, you know, have good enough English skills, I think, for translation and editing purposes. And that's a lot of what I do right now. Obviously, I'm in the process of getting my tertiary education certificates recognized by the Iraqi Higher Education Ministry, hopefully maybe to apply for a job at a university here in Iraq, eventually to teach in one of the Syriac departments.
ايه صورتها بس خور مثلا إذ دكواثا يعني إذ دكواثا مخ هذا خسبيقة مخ ميدانة خور مخ ميدان آخر وخ ميدان طامة مخ ساحات وبلقد ماثا حندولة أي شيخانة بحندولة إيه كلا شيخانة قلوا برايد ماثا خورولتي وكل برايد وقعد شيخانة.
Living what you research and being connected and being an active participant rather than a passive observer is very important in terms of legitimacy. So in terms of giving a message that comes from the source, that is first-hand rather than something that is second-hand or that is, let's say, secondary, you know. I prefer primary sources, you know, always when, as a historian, when you write history, when you write about a certain topic, you love to get the primary source so that you can make your own analysis and form your own opinions rather than relying on someone else's analysis and opinions. They're valuable too, but not, I mean, they're secondary. That's why they're called secondary sources. So being here has been very important, especially with my research, with my writing, with my participation in conferences locally and internationally. And to be honest, I've been blessed to have the honor to, you know, use my expertise provide my expertise in conferences, in international academic conferences, to be able to have participated in and helped organize, be on the organizing committee of 2 international conferences related to our people that took place here last year and this year. The first one was the Doctor of Syriac Symposium that took place in Ankawa last year, organized by the General Directorate of Syriac Culture and Arts. And then the second was the Assyrian Church of the East's 1700th commemoration of the Council of Nicaea, which took place just a few weeks ago, also here in Ankawa. So, you know, it's good not only for me to be able to provide a more legitimate and a more authentic account in my research, but I think it's also important to be able to bring the experience that I've had, the world-class experience that I've had, and bring it here, because I feel like our country and our people here deserve the best. So, you know, when I was young, we used to make fun of our people. Oh, look how mediocre they are. Look, everything they do is unprofessional. But, you know, why not improve them? Why not help them to be world-class? Because they're our people, they deserve the best. We shouldn't always stay mediocre. We should learn to improve ourselves. And I think one thing that affected me as a child, like being from a very nationalistic Assyrian family, you know, we were exposed to Assyrian nationalistic ideologies or ideas, and you know, one of the main intellectuals in this movement at the beginning of the 20th century was Na'um Faiq, who mostly wrote in Arabic, Classical Syriac, and Ottoman Turkish. He has a list of sayings. There's a book that I got when I was a teenager, or maybe early 20s, about his life that was published soon after he died in 1930. And you know, one of these sayings is, anything you know that is good, use it for the benefit of your country and your people. And I think that's something a lot of us need to do. And the other thing he said is, well, I don't know if it's his own saying or if he got it from somewhere else, but he said, you know, your family is the small nation and the nation is your large family. So I think, you know, this is very important. As a returnee, I don't see myself as being a returnee. I don't see myself as being someone from outside that's coming back. I see myself as coming back to my family. Even though my nuclear family, like my immediate family, is not here, but everybody else here that is like me, that speaks my language, that, you know, comes from my culture, they're also my family, and I feel connected.
مطيلي وغديث بسورتات خلمن كلخن برشيرخا إيلول نسوت برقية تلغراف من قشيشة بولس دوسلوخ.
وصلوا ايه كده؟
بسلوخ يعني كركوك.
اوكي.
ها مديرة اليوم
All of us have intergenerational trauma. Okay, we are an indigenous minority in our homeland, and we are facing an existential crisis at the moment, and we are burdened with trauma. We are burdened with a lot of very raw issues. Maybe I wasn't burdened with as much because my parents left Iraq at a time when they didn't experience all of these wars and the sanctions, and they weren't refugees. They immigrated to Australia with Iraqi passports, okay? So they didn't have all these problems of waiting for years to get visas in Jordan, in Lebanon, in wherever, in Istanbul, that our people are having right now. Maybe my experience hasn't been as tough as others, but at the same time, we did live with the trauma of watching our uncles and aunts that stayed one by one, escaping, us having to support them as refugees, whether it be in Istanbul or in Amman, and then afterwards receiving them in Australia and helping them to settle and watching them adjust. So we understand the trauma and we relive that trauma with them. And every time we would turn on the TV and see Iraq getting bombed by Americans or seeing all the terrorist activities that were happening in Iraq, we would relive that trauma because we are connected to Iraq. We are connected to this country and we are connected to the people here, even if we live thousands of miles away. It's very difficult for someone that's been born overseas or that's been raised overseas to want to come back because this trauma is still very much alive in our subconscious. But I think it's important to face the challenges head on, to face the traumas head on, to face our issues head on, and to confront them, and to feel that roller coaster ride of emotions that comes with it. So for me, coming to Iraq, going to Hakkari, standing in the valley where my grandfather at the age of 9 had to flee with everybody from his village, otherwise they would be exterminated, knowing that this valley is where my grandfather and his family escaped through, and crying, getting that emotion out, connecting with the place, seeing the place, feeling the anger, feeling the pain, feeling the sadness, feeling the happiness, feeling the joy, all of it mixed into one. It's important psychologically in order for us to break the cycle of trauma that we have and to move on to better things for our people and to find solutions, not just to keep running away from our trauma and running away from what's hurting us and running away from what's persecuting us, but to stop and to start building our future and strengthening ourselves and becoming more resilient. So unless we face our fears, we're not going to become more resilient. And I think this is important. This is why I said when I came back, I bit the bullet and came back. I said, you know what? Let me just see what it's going to be like. And to be honest, life here is normal. And I think the more of us come here and support each other, the more normal it will be. Okay? It'll only get better if we come with the right attitude and if we focus on self-sustainability and resilience as a community. Otherwise, if we come here as individuals and if we come here for our own personal benefit and personal maslaha, interests, I think that's not a good long-term strategy. We need to think communally and we need to think strategically because, look, not only do we need to be here for our culture to thrive and for us to be legitimately and authentically connected to our roots, but I think also our neighbors need us. The Kurds need us, the Arabs need us, the Turkmen need us. They all need to have us here because we are also contributing to the country. And we are also showing that there is another way to live that doesn't have to be a negative way and based constantly in, let's say, the traumas and the pains of the past. Okay? So I think that's one reason why after I've returned, I think my return will be permanent. I've actually moved away from here. I've moved away from Erbil and I live in the village of Bakhetme. It's nice. You know, you live in a community where everybody speaks your language, everybody's like you feel normal. In Australia, I never felt normal. At home, we had one culture, we spoke one language, we spoke, you know, we had one type of cuisine and one type of music and one type of all of that, and it was Iraqi or Assyrian. And then when we went outside, it was a different world. And we had to adjust to living a double life, right? A life as an Iraqi Assyrian inside your house, and then outside you have to conform to whatever Australian society feels like it wants to be at that time. An English-speaking society that is different culturally, linguistically, even sometimes religiously, even though Australia is a majority Christian country and we come from a Christian background, but even their Christianity is very different to ours. So everything, it becomes dichotomous. And at some point, you're either going to clam up and start living in a ghetto and ghettoizing yourself, or you're going to assimilate into what is the other society. It's very rare that you'll find people integrating and managing both identities together. So I think being here simplifies that experience, right? You don't have that necessity to conform, because why should I conform? Why should I conform? I'm with my people. I'm in my country. I don't need to conform. I look like everyone else.